computer. So good morning, Neil. It's great to see you. It's great to be here with Neil Sharpe, who I've known for quite a long time. And Neil has worked in clinical research for a very long time. I'm going to ask him to tell us a little bit about himself in a second. But it's just great to hear from people who have that experience and expertise. So thank you very much, Neil, for joining us. And let's just start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself and your career history and who you are.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Jo. So I got my first job in clinical research in 1990 as a CRA, and I was working for a contract research organisation called Innovex. And the client that I worked for through Innovex was Glaxo. And I worked on a peri-marketing phase 3 migraine trial on sumatriptan. And I was with Innovex for about 2 years and worked on other trials in phase 2, PMS, post-marketing surveillance, and other therapeutic areas whilst I was there. And the one thing that I enjoyed the most at Innovex was the training. It was really, really good. And that was when I actually started to think about a role in training in clinical research. After I left Innovex, I joined a company called Phisons, which was probably better known for their horticultural products. But I managed trials on anti-epilepsy on an anti-epilepsy compound. And it was whilst I was at Phisons that I bumped into a visitor who I'd worked with at Innovex and who told me that there was a CRA trainer's job going. So I applied for the job and got the job, and I went back to Innovex as a CRA, a clinical research trainer, training CRAs. And after a few years at Innovex then merged with Quintiles, and I stayed with Quintiles until around about the year 2000. I then went back to the former site, the former Phisons site, which was actually in Loughborough. And in the time that I was away from Phisons, they'd been acquired by Astra, and Astra had then merged with Zeneca. So I went back to work for AstraZeneca, and I stayed with them for about 10 years. Over the last decade, so between 2010 and now, I've been a freelancer. I've worked as a capability consultant for a small consultancy, and I've been a senior manager at Amgen.
Right.
So that's a kind of very short summary.
Yeah.
Of my past.
Interesting. And lots of different roles in different organizations. So
yes,
you've obviously seen quite a lot of different aspects of clinical research, and things have changed a lot. Those of us who've been around for a while know how much things have changed. So what are the major changes that you've seen over your time in clinical research?
So the biggest changes, hang on a minute, sorry, Jo, you might have to let me just...
That's all right.
So I've got some bullet points there. Yeah, okay. So start that bit again. Are you going to be able to edit this? You are going to be able to edit it, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think the biggest changes that I've witnessed, and I've witnessed a lot of changes in my various training roles, because I've had a lot of different people in different roles, different levels of seniority in many different countries over the last 20 years, and witnessed what's been going on and the impact that this has had on the operational aspects of multinational big pharmaceutical organizations. And whilst myself, I've not been operationally involved, so I haven't been hands-on as such in terms of actually conducting the work, such as a clinical trial, because in a training role, you tend not to do that. I've been training people in the new skills that they need, the new knowledge and capabilities in order to adapt to the changes that have taken place. So I've been close to it from that perspective. And the biggest change, I think, is the increase in regulation. Mm-hmm. When I was at Glaxo, we didn't have any SOPs. Mm-hmm. The protocol was about 10 pages long. Ethics was incredibly light touch. We didn't have formal ethics committees or ethics committee approval, and ICH GCP did not exist. Mm-hmm. We didn't have any clinical trial regulations. There were no legal requirements for us to follow specific standards. So this for me has been the biggest change, and we're still seeing that change now. With the introduction of the new EU clinical trial regulation. So that's a big change. The other change, I think, is the complexity of the actual clinical trials that we conduct.
Yeah.
The trial I worked on, I think it was 4 visits, double-blind comparator study, very straightforward. I used to carry the investigational product in the boot of my car.
I remember that.
I used to deliver it to the sites. I used to collect the used medication from the sites. Clearly, things have changed radically since then, and it's become much more challenging and more complex. The clinical trials themselves have become more complex, the design of the trials. Some of this is to do with the fact that the medical problems that we're trying to solve themselves are becoming more complex. And obviously, as we become more knowledgeable and informed about the biology of disease, which is a really important factor in determining how to go about developing new medicines, then we also realize and see how much more complex it is to actually identify the target and develop a lead that you can then take through to clinical development. So I would say those are the two biggest changes: the increase in regulation and the increase in complexity.
Yeah.
If you add that also then to the fact that many of the organizations that we work in now have themselves become far more complex, we've almost got this, these 3 areas and challenges that the clinical research arena needs to try and meet.
Yeah. So bearing that in mind, how things have changed so far, what do you think are the biggest challenges that we're facing now and for the future?
I think some of the challenges that we had back in the day are the same. So things like subject recruitment, investigator recruitment, compliance with the protocol amendments. We had all of these issues when I joined the industry in 1990, and we still have those issues today.
Yeah.
We've never seemed to really be able to get on top of making sure that these things don't happen. Protocols that get approved almost immediately need an amendment.
Yeah.
And you end up with a huge list of amendments, which is obviously very difficult for the people who are organising the trial, managing and overseeing the trial, but also very difficult for the people who are actually conducting the trial, because things keep changing. And whilst I'm talking about change, one of the challenges ahead from a training perspective, from a learning perspective, is that people are having to relearn almost daily because of the constant change that is occurring in the industry. And that's a real challenge for training functions. The way we learn, lots of different ways of delivering content. And there's all sorts of theories and philosophies now about how we should be training people, but fundamentally, we all still learn in exactly the same way. The physiology of learning hasn't changed.
Yeah.
But we have to get to grips with this constantly changing environment and the need to continually relearn. And the length of time that your learning actually lasts, or the so-called half-life of our knowledge, has fallen as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, actually. I hadn't really thought about things that way. So how do you see things developing in the future? What do you think the major changes that are coming will be?
I think it will be a continuation of what's currently happening. So the need to reduce development times will always be top of the agenda. The need to reduce operating costs will also be top of the agenda. Because as health care organizations or healthcare provider organizations continue to face challenges in their own in the work that they're doing, then getting investigators to conduct clinical trials will continue to be a challenge.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think the financial incentives and the opportunity to work on something scientifically very interesting will be the allure, will be the motivator that will make sure that our healthcare providers continue to remain engaged with the industry and clinical development. I think that the the recent events globally in terms of some disclosure about how medicines are developed.
Yeah.
I think that helps.
Yeah. So awareness is increased, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Of how a drug is developed and what's involved and the costs. So I think that those challenges will continue on and beyond.
Yeah. So in some ways, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Some things haven't changed, Jo, absolutely, and some things are cyclic.
Yeah,
You know, so you'll have a phase where you'll be trying to deal with a problem, and then whether you deal with that problem or not, it will go away, and then a few years down the line, it will bob back up again, and everyone says, "Didn't we sort this out? Why is this still happening?" I think the key to success when it comes to solving business problems, because that's fundamentally what I've done in the last 20 years as a trainer, is to try and solve business problems, is to actually look at the heart of the issue, the root cause of the issue, and identify what's causing these problems, and then dealing with those. And I've actually never seen that happen. It seems to be a treatment of the symptom, a sticking plaster approach. So I think it would be good in terms of in the future if more time was spent upfront looking at the actual problem itself and what's causing it. Before we start to try and fix it.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. That root cause analysis is the critical part of any business process, and I think it's the thing that gets left so often.
Yes,
I think it's a really important point. So my final question to you before we wrap this up is, if someone new was starting in the industry or they were interested in getting into clinical research, what would be your advice to them? What are your pearls of wisdom?
What I would say to them is, if you're new to clinical research, is don't beat yourself up if you can't figure things out straight away. Don't worry if it takes you months and months and months before you actually start to feel like you know what you're doing. And actually, you probably never ever will feel that you know what you're doing in every area of your role. There will be some parts of your role where you'll still feel unsure. You might lack a bit of confidence in that specific area. And especially now, that's how it is. And it takes a long time to get your head around things. You've got to understand the organization you're working in. You've got to understand the environment that you're working in, and how things fit together. And then also you've got to learn and develop your capabilities, and then you've got to change and adapt on a continual basis. So it's really hard to say, I know what I'm doing in every area of my role. So don't worry about that. And my second tip is really basic, but really important. And that is, spend some time, 10, 15 minutes every single day, planning your time. It's the one thing that I did that I found helped me the most with de-stressing my workload. And if I can add to this and extend it slightly, plan the next day, the day before. So plan tomorrow, today, sit down, 15 minutes, write a list, look at your diary, have a think about what's happening today. Obviously, it's good to go further out than that if you can. But go, switch your computer off, knowing I know what I'm up to tomorrow. I know what I need to do. Because that is a real de-stressor.
That's very good advice. I think I might need to start doing that myself. Thank you.
One last thing, don't take your work home.
Good point. Even if you are at home, you need to try and switch it off and leave it behind.
It's become practically impossible to follow that advice. But if you're working from home, as many people are, try and create a dividing line if you can. Try and put things away if you can. And switch it off if you can. Because actually research has shown that people that take their briefcases home with them actually don't get the work done that they've promised themselves they would do, and they get more stressed because the briefcase is sitting there looking at them saying, you brought me home, there's some work in here, you need to get it done. And oftentimes it doesn't get done
Yeah.
For whatever reason. So try and create that line, that red line between work and home if you can. But I understand that is actually quite challenging for some people.
Yeah, it is. What we do is we go out for a walk at the end of the day. So we plan it and we just go for a walk at the end of the day, and that does create a bit of a dividing line. But I recognise that's not possible for everyone. But
yes, exactly.
Find your own way of doing it. Yeah,
indeed.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Neil. It's been great to talk to you, and thank you for all your insights and words of wisdom, and best of luck for the future.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.